Riddle me this, riddle me that. Are we in a matrix? Is the world rigged? Social media rules the whole world, baby, you dig? The Alpo show is in the know. The human spirit experiment will help you grow. The show starts now.
Welcome to Alpo. For all you late night people, thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it. It's 9:35 Pacific. Well, we have some things to talk about tonight. Hope your day's been going. Today is Thursday, and I'm going to be on a little bit later on today too. So early morning. So much is going on. I'm going to pretty much get into it really quick here on what is going on. And it has to do with our generation coming up, the Generation Z, the ones from 2009 to here. And the experiences that they're going through. Let me just say this. I am taking the time to understand what is going on and how to understand the generation that's coming up, Generation Z. And it's really easy to make criticism, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to say that this is a generation that none of us, including myself, grew up in the same conditions that these young people have grown up in. They are a product of the environment that was created by the ones who are older. This is a generation that has lived in an isolation that almost no generation has lived in. This is a generation that was brought up with a computer in front of them, with some type of computer from the moment they came out. This is a generation that drugs have been made available so much earlier than any generation probably ever. This is a generation that has been immersed from the very beginning into this social media hurricane, cyclone, earthquake. It's almost a natural disaster of what has been placed upon them. I know some will say, well, this is the most spoiled, rotten group because they got everything. They got all the technology from immediately. They came in when the money was being made. More people were making money. They came in when the entertainment, the social media, all of this. What's going on with them? And the state of mind right now. And so I'm going to bring up an article in the Atlantic from Derek Thompson. We're going to discuss this on why this Generation Z is right now so sad. And we're going to go into this article from Mr. Thompson, and it's going to find the results of there's a CDC study, and let's go over it. We might as well just go ahead and start it now. And the article is from the Atlantic. So I am quoting my sources from the Atlantic as well as the CDC. All right. So I know, maybe I don't carry any weight here, but I do want everyone to know that I'm always looking at the facts. So, why American teens are so sad? Four forces are propelling the rising rates of depression among young people. And thank you again, Mr. Thompson, for writing such a great article. You can sign up for his newsletter. This is going to be posted here. You can find this article, by the way. Right? Just put in the Atlantic, Derek Thompson, why are children so, why are people, at least our generation, why American teens are so sad. So it starts off with the United States experiencing an extreme teenage mental health crisis. From 2009 to 2021, the share of American high school students who say they feel persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness rose from 26% to 44%, according to a new CD study. This is the highest level of teenage sadness ever recorded. Now, when you just think about it, we've been through World War I, World War II. Statistics haven't been around forever, okay, but certainly long enough to know that they're here in the last 50 years. Now, it's hard to believe that, but the facts are the facts, and this is what the CDC is coming out to say. And so, why does a group that has so much feeling so sad? The government survey of almost 8,000 high school students, which was conducted in the first 6 months of 2021, found a great deal of variation in mental health among different groups. More than 1 in 4 girls reported that they had seriously contemplated attempting suicide during the pandemic, which was twice the rate of boys. Nearly half of the LGBTQ teens said they had contemplated suicide during the pandemic, compared with 14% of their heterosexual peers. Sadness among white teens seemed to be rising faster than among other groups. Now, why is that? Well, I think that one major reason is the blame that's going on to the white society, and that these young people are feeling the weight of this generational blame that they had nothing to do with. Literally, absolutely nothing to do with. But the fallout, as you probably heard, that the sins of the generations goes next to the generation, and yada yada. Okay, not you want to call it sin, but the mistakes. Let's just call it that. The mistakes pass on from generation to generation. And so there's this automatic blame that's been given to them. Okay, at least in my opinion, you know. So just that alone, with this whole, they see it. They're seeing the CRT right now. What's going on? So, kids are very sensitive. So why wouldn't they actually feel that way? And here's the percentage here. Percentage of high school students feeling persistently sad or hopeless. And right at the top is the LGBT. And then right next to them is the females. And then overall from both sides. And then white and black and the male. But the big picture is the same across all categories. Almost every measure of mental health is getting worse for every teenage demographic, and it's happening all over the country. Since 2009, sadness and hopelessness have increased for every race, for straight teens and gay teens, for teens who say they've never had sex, and for those who say they've had sex with males and or females, for students in each year of high school and for all teens in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. So, why is this happening? I want to propose several answers to that question, along with one meta explanation that ties them together. But before I start with that, I want to squash a few tempting fallacies. The first fallacy is that we can chalk this all up to teens behaving badly. In fact, lots of self reported teen behaviors are moving in a positive direction. Since the 1990s, drinking and driving is down almost 50%. School fights are down 50%. Sex before 13 is down more than 70%. School bullying is down. And LGBTQ acceptance is up. The second fallacy is that teens have always been moody and sadness looks like it is rising only because people are more willing to talk about it. Objective measures of anxiety and depression, such as eating disorders, self harming behavior, and teen suicides, are sharply up the past decade. Across the country, we have witnessed dramatic increase in emergency department visits for all mental health emergencies, including suspected suicide attempts. The American Academy of Pediatrics said in October. Today's teenagers are more comfortable talking about mental health, but rising youth sadness is no illusion. The third fallacy is that today's mental health crisis was principally caused by the pandemic and an overreaction to COVID. Rising teen sadness isn't a new trend, but rather the acceleration and broadening of a trend that clearly started before the pandemic. Lawrence Steinberg, a psychologist at Temple University, told me, but he added, we shouldn't ignore the pandemic either. The fact that COVID seems to have made teen mental health worse offers clues about what really is driving the rise to sadness. Here are the four forces propelling that increase. Social media use. And it's already been proven about how social media is affecting young ladies. 5 years ago, the psychologist Jean Twenge wrote an influential and controversial feature in The Atlantic titled Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation? Based on her book, around, uh, and around 2012, Twenge wrote she had noticed that teen sadness and anxiety began to steadily rise in the US and other rich, developed countries. She looked for explanations and realized that 2012 was precisely when the share of Americans who owned a smartphone surpassed 50% and mobile social media use spiked. Now, in the past few years, scientists have disputed the idea that social media use itself makes teenagers miserable. There's been absolute hundreds of social media and mental health studies, almost all showing pretty small effects. Jim Hancock, a behavioral psychologist at Stanford University, who has conducted a meta analysis of 226 such studies, told the New York Times recently. But I think Twenge's strongest point is misunderstood. Social media isn't like rat poison, which is toxic to almost everyone. It's more like alcohol, a mildly addictive substance that can enhance social situations, but can also lead to dependency and depression among my minority of users. This is very close to the conclusion reached by none other than Instagram. The company's internal research from 2020 found that while most users had a positive relationship with the app, one third of teen girls said Instagram made them feel worse, even though these girls feel unable to stop themselves from logging on. And if you don't believe a company owned by Facebook, believe a big study from Cambridge University in which researchers looked at 84,000 people of all ages and found that social media was strongly associated with worse mental health, certain sensitive life periods, including for girls ages 11 to 13. So now, what is the major difference? Well, I believe, according to this article in the CDC, that it's social media that these our children engaged in almost immediately, and so how do you handle it? I mean, when we were growing up, we were out playing in the backyard. I mean, our internet was going over and knocking on your friend's house and see what they were doing. And so these kids, have been bathed. They were thrown in the tub of this media frenzy. But if you can just imagine, at our age, just even at our age, thinking back and thought, what would it be like if you had to wear a mask when you came into school? And what a smile meant. All of us through this whole pandemic all had to wear the mask, and it had to always, you had to feel like you're smiling. I would tell people, I'm smiling, hello, So this is something that has been caused, I believe, for profit. And that's what it really comes down to. Let's continue on. All right, let's go continue on here. Why would social media affect mental health in this way? One explanation is that teenagers, and teenager girls in particular, are uniquely sensitive to the judgment of friends, teachers, and the digital crowd. As I've written, social media seems to hijack this keen peer sensitivity and drive obsessive thinking about body language and popularity. The problem isn't just that social media fuels anxiety, but also that, as we'll see, it makes it harder for today's young people to cope with the pressure of growing up. So now just think about this. Just if you can go back in your mind and know what it was like as older people, or what it was like when you went to high school. And here you are in your own peer pressure of the people in school, your classmates, your teachers. And then picture it where you're looking to accept yourself within this crowd. But now on social media, you have literally millions of people now who can criticize you. And they're in the air. And your friends are watching and they see the comments. So you not only have your own individual peers, which is hard enough, but here you have social media. Social media giving this artificial criticism. That's high pressure. That's real high pressure. Let's continue on. Number two, sociality is down. Both Steinberg and twins stressed that the biggest problem with social media might not be not social media itself, but rather the activities that it replaces. I tell parents all the time that if Instagram is merely displacing TV, I'm not concerned about it. Steinberg told me, but today's teens spend more than 5 hours daily on social media, and the habit seems to be displacing quite a lot of beneficial activity. The share of high school students who got 8 or more hours of sleep declined 30% from 2007 to 2019. Compared with their counterparts in the 2000s or the millennials, today's teens are less likely to go out with their friends, get their driver's license, or even play youth sports. The pandemic and the closure of schools likely exacerbated teen loneliness and sadness. A 2020 survey from Harvard's Graduate School of Education found that loneliness spiked in the first year of the pandemic for everyone, but it rose most significantly for young people. It's well established that what protects teens from stress is close social relationships. Steinberg said when kids can't go to school to see their friends and peers and mentors, that social isolation could lead to sadness and depression, particularly from those predisposed to feeling sad or depressed anyway. The most important to say clearly, aloneness, aloneness isn't the same as loneliness, and loneliness isn't the same as depression. But more aloneness, including from heavy smartphone use, and more loneliness, including more school closures, might have combined to push up sadness among teenagers who need sociality to protect them from the pressures of the stressful world. Now that's a mouthful, but at the end of the day, when you look at it, you look at no matter what, you can say, "Oh my gosh, man, these guys are the most spoiled of all." But what it turned out to be, these were the most isolated of all. When I was growing up, I had relatives right down the street. I had friends and neighbors right across the street. There was also always social going on. You can always just go run up. Can Derek play? Can Butchie play? You got to go down the street and go play basketball with your cousins. This is what they grew up in. And it was on and off, on and off. It's a lot of pressure. I think that we all, especially now as grown ups, we need to understand that. Let's continue on to number three. The world is stressful, and there is more news about the world's stressors. Golly. Lisa Damore, a clinical psychologist and author, told me that no single factor can account for the rise of teenage sadness. But she believes that part of the answer is that the world has become more stressful, or at least teenagers' perception of the world seems to be causing them more stress. In the last decade, teenagers have become increasingly stressed by concerns about gun violence, climate change, and the political environment. She wrote in an email, increased stress among young people is linked to increasing levels of sadness. Girls, more than boys, are socialized to internalize distress, meaning that they tend to collapse in on themselves by becoming depressed or anxious. Also, fear about finances, climate change, and viral pandemics are smashing into local concerns about social approval and setting one's uh, up for success. I think it is. Think of it as a pylon effect. Steinberg said, "We're coming out of the pandemic, and suddenly Russia goes to war. Every day, it feels like there's something else. It creates a gloomy narrative about the world." Now, for us, as we can see, and I can see it now myself, here in the last 3 years, um, you know, this world has changed for the adults. And, you know, we've been in a roller coaster and we're adults. These kids don't have the experience to fall back on. They 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 fall back on their mind, but it's not developed enough. They don't have the experience to know how to bounce back, and that tomorrow's another day, and that you're here for a long time, and things are up and down at times. Okay, now more than ever, I will admit we are in a world we've never seen before, and it's because of technology more than anything. And I've said this in my shows that if technology rises above spirit, the world is doomed. As long as who we are as people, that's up higher than technology, then we're fine. But right now, Technology is way above. Now, spirit, there's no talk of you being a spirit. Okay. There's only a talk of how many cars do you have? How much money do you make? How beautiful you are. Shallowness. So there's no depth. The roots that these children are planting are not sprouting. You understand? It's like they can't dig the roots in because of everything that's going on. And well, it has a lot to do with the parents too. So first thing we want to do is figure out how to understand each other. All right. Next, so this sense of doom doesn't just come from teenagers. It comes from us, the news media, and from the social media channels through which our work is distributed. News sources have never been more abundant or more accessible. But journalism also has a famous bad news bias, which flows from an unfortunate but accurate understanding that negativity generally gets more attention. When we plug our brain into a news feed, we are usually choosing to deluge ourselves with negative representations of reality. A well known 2019 experiment randomly forced people to stop using Facebook for 4 weeks before a midterm election. The study found that those who logged off spent more time hanging out with family and friends, consistent with the idea that social media uses displaces pro social behaviors. It also found that deactivating Facebook reduced factual news knowledge while increasing subjective well being. We cannot rule out the possibility that teens are sad about the world, not only because the world contains sadness, but also because young people have 24/7 access to sites that are constantly telling them they should be depressed about it. So if we think, if we're depressed about it, or bummed out about it, or it stops us from doing our things of given by our freedoms, if it's taking away our freedoms, then they're seeing it themselves. We have the ability to let it roll off our skin. Not all of us, but that's part of the practice and experiencing because you have the experience. You're older, you're 30, you're 40, you're 50, you're 60, you're 70, you're 80. You have the experience to overcome. These kids don't, and they're still developing it. Number four, modern parenting strategies. In the past 40 years, American parents, especially those with college degrees, have nearly doubled the amount of time they spend coaching, chauffeuring, tutoring, and otherwise helping their teenage children. The economist Valerie Ramey has labeled this the rug rat race. High income parents, in particular, are spending much more time preparing their kids for a competitive admissions process from the time that they're born. When I interviewed Rami about her work in 2019, she told me that she couldn't believe the amount of pressure our friends were putting on their kids to get ready for college. The rugrat race is an upper class phenomenon that can't explain a generalized increase in teenage sadness, but it could well explain part of what is going on. And in the 2020 and in the 2020 Atlantic feature, What Happened to American Childhood, Kate Julian described a related phenomenon that affects families a bit more broadly. Anxious parents, in seeking to insulate their children from risk and dangers, are unintentionally transferring their anxiety to their kids. I want to pull out 2 points from Julian's complex essay. First, children are growing up slower than they used to. Today's children are less likely to drive, get a summer job, or asked to do chores. The problem isn't that kids are lazy, homework time has risen, or that scrubbing dishes magically dispels anxiety disorders. Rather, Julian wrote, these activities provide children with two very important things: tolerating discomfort and having a sense of personal competence. Second, researchers have noted a broad increase in an accommodative parenting style. If a girl is afraid of dogs, an accommodation would be keeping her away from every friend's house with a dog. Or if a boy won't eat vegetables, feeding him nothing but turkey loaf for 4 years. An actual story from the article. These behaviors come from love, but part of growing up is learning how to release negative emotions in the face of inevitable stress. If kids never figure out how to do that, they're more likely to experience severe anxieties as teenagers. Now, when we were growing up, you had to be home by dark. You're playing basketball, you're playing football, you're playing hide and go seek. You're totally interactive. Your parents allowed you to get bumps and bruises. In other words, they allowed you. I had to walk home from school. I was in a Catholic school. I was jumped at sixth grade by six people walking home. Broke my thermos bottle, pushed me down, kicked me. I was all dirty. This is sixth grade. I'm 6 years old. First grade. First grade. What did I get out of that? Well, it made me a lot tougher. I became a point man, like I was in the army. I'm seeing who's on the block on who I could walk. Where should I walk? And I ended up getting in a lot of fights. Do I want to ever be in another one? No. Did it make me tougher? Yes. Absolutely yes. Julian highlighted Julian highlighted a new treatment out of Yale University's Child Study Center called SPACE, or Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions. Put simply, SPACE forces parents to be less accommodating. If the girl is afraid of dogs, encourage her to play with young puppies. If the boy hates vegetables, caramelize the hell out of the broccoli. This sort of advice is infinitely easier to type than to put into practice, but folding a bit of exposure therapy into modern parenting and childhood might help teenagers grapple with a complex and stressful world. Now, other explanations don't fit into the above categories. Maybe drugs are a big factor. One study found that sixth of the increase in suicides was associated, with parental opiate addiction. Maybe the authors, Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt, are right that college campuses and internet culture have come to celebrity fragility. Maybe political polarizing is fueling anxiety, not only by creating mutual hatred, but also by encouraging people to reject opposing views, which over time reduces their capacity to handle cognitive dissonance in a confusing world. The truth is, I'm not satisfied by any of the above explanations. This is what Derek said, on their own. But I see no reason to keep them alone. They interact, amplify, and compound, and together they paint a powerful picture. Now, the world is overwhelming, and an inescapably negative news cycle creates an atmosphere of existential gloom, not just for teens, but also for their moms and dads. The more overwhelming the world fears to parents, the more they may try to bubble wrap their kids with accommodations. Over time, this protective parenting style deprives children of the emotional resilience they need to handle the world's stress. Childhood becomes more insular. Time spent with friends, driving, dating, and working summer jobs all decline. College pressures skyrocket. Outwardly, teens are growing up slower, but online, they're growing up faster. The internet exposes teenagers not only to supportive friendships, but also to bullying, threats, despairing, conversations about mental health, and a slurry of unsolvable global problems. A carnival of negativity. Social media places in every teen's pocket a quantified battle royal for scarce popularity that can displace hours of sleep and make many teens, especially girls, feel worse about their body and life. Amplifying amplify these existing trends with the global pandemic and an unprecedented period of social isolation, and suddenly the remarkable rise of teenage sadness doesn't feel all that mysterious. Now, does it? You see, when you look at the environment, and this really brought light, and I hope it did bring some light to you. If you understand, this is part of us having to understand each other. And now, my opinion about this, having and read the article, is what it's causing is kids, teenagers are not growing up. It's taking them longer to grow up because of the accommodations by parents to protect them from no harm. Okay. You got to skin your knees sometimes. The scab comes, the scab disappears, and you move on. We all have scab. This is why we're always talking about your wisdom, how to understand it by being an adult of my spirit, an adult of my mind, adult of my thought, adult of my emotions, adult of my actions, adult of my body, adult of my love, adult of my surroundings, adult of my relationship. And for all of them, finally, what's going to happen is being an adult of your decisions. If you're making your adult of your decision from such a protective, you know, sitting in the background and just looking and not experiencing. That's why this is called the human spirit experiment. You're experiencing within your spirit to give you greater experiences. Makes sense? And so what I want here to do is I just want us all, we have to understand each other. And one of the biggest things that we have to do, what I have to do, what I have learned, I have to understand how these kids are growing up. They're a new generation. There's no one like them. And so part of us, if this gets any insight to help you with your kids, or even your kids, friends of your kids, your friends that have kids, okay, and to give them some compassion here and allow them, because it's going to take them longer to understand it. You don't have the experience. Their experience is trauma. They're reacting from their trauma. So, in conclusion, all of us need to get better. All of us has gone through this trauma. But the main thing is, for us, the ones who are older, it's time to be an adult of your spirit, an adult of your emotions, so that we can help these children, these young people, make it through. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate y'all coming in. I'll be back later on today. And thank you for listening to Alpo Show, the Human Spirit Experiment. Oh, one more thing I need you to do. Please subscribe to my channel. I am being shadow banned. And you have to subscribe to me and also press that bell. Please press that bell so that you'll be notified when I get my shows up. And down here, you're going to look and you'll see some other videos that you can look at. That's for the ones who are going to be watching this later. We'll see you again.